Okay, so I think we'll make a start. Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here this evening for this Meet the Artist event with A.MAL, our current exhibiting artists at ONCA. This is Lydia speaking. I'm the gallery manager here at ONCA. My pronouns are she and they. I'm going to give a visual description of myself just for accessibility purposes. I am a white genderqueer person. I've got short, dark brown curly hair, wearing clear frame glasses. I've got a black polo neck jumper and a pink striped shirt on. And behind me in the background, I'm in the gallery at the moment, so A.MAL's exhibition is behind me, and you can see various TV screens and kind of hanging acetate panels with different images on, and various like pink and blue lighting within the gallery. So yeah, this event is being recorded. It will be shared on ONCA's YouTube channel in the next couple of days. But the kind of rough overview of the structure for tonight's event is that I'm going to introduce A.MAL and Lost Species Day that the exhibition is part of, and the exhibition very briefly, and then hand over to the artists for them to introduce themselves individually and their artworks that are in the exhibition. I've prepared a couple of questions in advance just to kind of get the conversation going, but it's intended to be a kind of very informal, relaxed event just to give the artists an opportunity to share more about themselves and their kind of their work and their processes. But yeah, feel free to do what you need to be comfortable. We don't have a break built into this event just because it's just an hour and a half, but feel free to get up and leave and move around and do what you need to be comfortable. So yeah, we'll have about half an hour of sort of general conversation in response to those questions, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. And yeah, if you have any technical issues or have any questions as we go along, feel free to pop them into the chat, and I'll try and keep an eye on that. So yeah, just to begin. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, this exhibition is part of Lost Species Day, or Remembrance Day for Lost Species, as it's also known. And that takes place every year on the 30th of November. And this year, sorry, not this year, we're in 2022 now, aren't we? Last year was the 10th anniversary of Lost Species Day. And it's a chance every year to explore the stories of extinct and critically endangered species, cultures, lifeways, and ecological communities. It often takes the form of an exhibition here at ONCA, with an accompanying events program, with each year having a specific focus or theme that's slightly different under the larger umbrella of extinction. So last year, 2021, we put out an open call for exhibition proposals for the theme Interdependence, and A.MAL's proposal was selected for the exhibition. A.MAL are a collective of artists that examine connections between colonialism and climate injustice, and question current relationships between the global north and the global south. Their exhibition, In, Among, and Between, looks at species extinction specifically in North Africa. And as the exhibition name suggests, the importance of interactions, interconnections, and interdependence among species and systems. So I'm going to hand over now to the artists to just briefly introduce themselves. Please give a brief visual description of yourself as you're happy to do so, and also just very briefly talk about the work that you have in the exhibition. So I am going to just pick someone, and then if you can hand on to somebody else. So Sabrina, I'm going to pick you. So if you could unmute yourself, that'd be great.
Thanks, Lydia. So hi, I'm Sabrina. My pronouns are she, her. A bit of description about me. So my work in the show is the overhead projector with diagrams, acetate sheets that you can kind of play with. It's supposed to be interactive. And alongside that is an audio piece, which is a reworking of a piece called Migrant Testing, which is about interdependence and the evolutionary ecology of interactions. So that's what's mostly on the diagrams. Bit of background. So I mostly work with parasites, biological material, material more so organism based as well. Looking at interactions. It's mostly sound work, but it does get into a mixture of sound and sculpture. Yeah, and I'm based in London, so I think that's a bit for me. Should I pass it on to someone as well?
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great.
Okay, so Elodie, over to you.
So yeah, I'm Elodie, and shortly to introduce my appearance, I'm sitting in a dark room and I'm wearing a thrifted t-shirt, which is black with white patterns, and I have a pair of glasses and pearl earrings. I'm part of a collective 560 Zoom. Together with Yunus El Husseini, we worked on the works which are exhibited at ONCA. And the collective is working with audiovisual hardware devices from the late 80s, 90s. Like we use distortion, loops, all kind of hardware generated distortions to kind of grasp sociocultural phenomena in Morocco. And I'm basically pretty in the research. My background, I'm a media scholar, interested in visual media cultures. And we exhibited 3 works. One, we collaborated with Leila. It's intermixing hardware generated distortions, footage from the shores of El Jadida, which is a city in Morocco, where algae, the red algae, is harvested, and also intertwining it with North African storytelling. So we had a back and forth collaboration between text and visual media. And the other works are also centered around the algae. One is about hardware, like recorded frequencies, like electrical signals, which comes from the algae reacting to light, salt, all kind of stimuli or stimula. I don't know how you say it in English, but it's the algae, like it's in continuation of the work we did with Leila. We tried to let the algae speak. Here it's really the algae speaking in its language, her own language. I don't know. I always try. I speak about it like it's female. Comes kind of naturally. And the third work is kind of reflecting on research, how we worked in this hybrid work mode within the framework of the A.MAL Collective. It's a desktop film, like located on my laptop, on my desktop. I'm decluttering all the files I collected through the research and narrating the research. Yeah, so maybe we're going to talk later about it a bit more. And I'm handing over to Jessica.
Thank you, Elodie. I apologize, I've got a cough, so bear with me. For my appearance, I have a short, like curly bob, and I'm in a room with lots of creamy gold colored furnishings, and I have red lipstick on. And my sort of contribution to the exhibition is less sort of straight cut rather than a single piece. I worked on more the curation or exhibition design or concept. So the sort of pink wall image you can see behind Lydia, that's like something that I worked on, but generally just the whole feel of the exhibition maybe more. And I was also very lucky to work with Sarah on a film, so maybe I'll hand over to you now to talk about the film.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah bin Abdullah. So thank you, Jessica. First of all, I just wanted to say that I'm a huge fan of everyone here and what they've done. Basically, I came pretty late. You know, I feel like I don't know anyone, but I met Jessica a few months ago through a friend, and I was working on a documentary. I'm a film director. I was working on a documentary about the fisherwomen of Morocco in Tangier, near Tangier, and how they were the first group of women that were granted access to actually fish and do that as a job in Morocco. So we talked about that with Jessica, and that's how she told me about this exhibit and everything she was doing. And sorry, I think my internet is really terrible right now. So yeah, she showed me the essay that she wrote for the exhibit, and I was really drawn to that because I was doing a documentary about fisherwomen fishing sardines in the north, but I wasn't really aware about else. I learned a lot, and we just connected and wanted to do this little film that you guys have at the gallery right now. And it's just basically a short abstract, you know, we didn't really necessarily want to do a story or a beginning, middle, and end. We just wanted to do like kind of, you know, montage or sequence that kind of is looping around. And something that attracted me from Jessica's essay is just how wonderful she wrote it, but like all the connection with her family and her in Morocco and eating the sardines and everything. And we wanted to go somewhere in Morocco and film footage of just food, street food, and just how important sardines are in Moroccan culture. And I think we got that, and it was a very fun experience. And yeah, so let's see who else. Oh, Layla.
Hi, thanks, Sarah. I'm Layla. I'm a mixed race white person in my 30s. My pronouns are she, they. I'm wearing a black kind of roll neck jumper and a red, white and green Algeria scarf for anyone who can see. There we go. And silver hoop earrings. And I'm in a kind of quite a plain white room with one picture of a section of the sky on it. And I showed the film that Elodie spoke about, and I also showed a film that I made called The Animals, the Plant and the Stranger. And this kind of put together some archival footage from my family. I'm very interested in archives that we shot in the 80s in Morocco, or my parents did. And I paired that with some stories that I wrote about 3 species that went extinct in North Africa as a result of colonialism and capitalism and kind of overconsumption. So I wrote about the Barbary lion, Silphium, this kind of fennel-like plant, and also a trout species that was endemic to one specific lake in the Atlas Mountains. And I don't know, I became very haunted by these species and a bit obsessed with them. I also interestingly found that like the smaller the species got, the less likely they were to be kind of remembered. So it was very easy to find out about kind of big mammals, but I was really curious about these smaller species as well, which I couldn't find any information about their disappearance, even though I know it has happened. So I wrote 3 stories really inspired by kind of North African oral storytelling traditions about the moment of these species extinction, which actually Persephone told me is enderling. There's a word for the last of a species, which is enderling, which I only found out after writing this bit of work. But I thought it was kind of a really beautiful, sad word. And I paired it with this archival footage from Morocco that I've got. And I felt like there was a lot of loss woven into it because my family were only in Morocco because we couldn't go to Algeria. So I didn't meet my family until I was like 15 because there was a civil war happening at the time. So there's this kind of a bit of a sadness about being there and that footage that we've got. And also I got my dad to read the stories aloud in English, which is a language he had no choice to learn. It isn't his language. There's a lot of kind of loss in connection in our, loss in our family around language as well. Yeah, I think that's me.
That's great. Thank you so much, everyone. It's really nice to hear from you all and to hear you talk about your work. So yeah, I kind of put some kind of general questions together. They're not aimed at anyone specifically, so it's kind of a free for all. Whoever wants to kind of answer and talk, and yeah, feel free to respond to each other's responses. It's not this is just a relaxed conversation. So yeah, to get us started, could you tell us a bit more about how A.MAL Collective came to be and what you've kind of done together prior to this exhibition at ONCA?
Yes, so the sort of inception of this sort of project called A.MAL came from I'm mixed Moroccan and British, and I've always felt that there was a lack of like dialogue or opportunity or like cultural or artistic exchange. Really, there's a lot of exchange with like francophone countries, but less so with the UK, that was available to me anyway. And so I knew that this was something I wanted to encourage and create a space for. And then the British Council Morocco ran a project to celebrate a 300-year anniversary of trade relations between the UK and Morocco. And through that, I developed a pilot residency program, and that is how I met 562, Layla, and Sabrina. And maybe someone wants to talk a little bit about the residency and how how you found it and how what we worked on together.
Yeah, so I was delighted to take part in the Red Gold Residency that Jessica set up, which is how we've sort of started all working collectively, really, was that first residency. And that was focused on red algae species that are heavily kind of exploited in Al Jadida, this specific like bit of coastline in Morocco, because there's this huge demand globally, particularly in like America and Europe, for like extracts from that red algae, which are used as a sort of vegan gelatine substitute. That's like one of the most common uses of it. So with veganism being very popular at the moment, it's kind of really, there's like a big demand for it. So that was like the starting point, was using that to explore wider sustainability relations between the global north and south. And I think we all just ended up with a lot of research going back and forth between all of us. And we did some like amazing workshops that Jessica organised with a few different people, including Iman Zubey, who is in Morocco, and we've worked with on other projects now, who's done some work with some researchers from Europe who went there, and she had quite a strange experience with them, and she talked to us about that, and that was really insightful to kind of get an understanding of what it might be like for somebody going there and doing some research from outside with this very like specific kind of angle. And then yeah, we all ended up slowly building up our own kind of pieces of work. So there was a lot of kind of crossover between all the works that we were doing. And yeah, me and Elodie and Eunice also collaborated on a piece of work, and this all culminated in an exhibition we did in London at the P21 gallery, which was really, really nice to have that there. Does anyone else want to say anything else about it?
Yeah, I think I might add a few things, just to go off from the P21 exhibition that we did. specifically at that space, I think because we're all based in different locations, for that show specifically, I think that's where we finally met in person, Layla. So it was quite a funny way to meet the people that you've been really talking about, important discussion, like important, you know, having important discussions and thinking about not the sustainability fix, right? But it's not some, but kind of thinking about around that, kind of critiquing things around that as well, especially with kind of really unpacking the kind of the materiality of algae, and then there was the ethical side of it, especially talking about the workshops that happened. So the ethical, the cultural, the memory side of algae, all of these kind of resonances, which were quite important to talk around. And to add to that as well, we had the opportunity to travel to different places. I got to visit a few labs as well, which is really great, specifically based around algae, and looking at specific labs that work with algae in a more so sustainable way, and that includes waste flows, of how they kind of feed the algae and things like that, sustainable waste flows. And that was a really good opportunity to kind of go and do some physical research and speak to specific kind of labs, kind of critique their processes, and then bring that kind of discussion back as well. I think we spoke a lot online, which was really good. There was quite a few kind of touch points of interacting and unpacking specific things that we did. And Elodie, I know that when you did a site visit as well, you went to Al-Jadida. Do you know, maybe now's a good time to talk about that as well?
Yeah, I really like as Sabrina already described, how we moved forward together, or how the residency came along, when we started with this Zoom discussions, or Jessica was providing for us the space to think together, and then exchanging emails with Layla about photography, so not specifically about the algae itself, and then starting collaborating, sending footage, and doing field work or research trips. So everybody on its own side, like in UK or in front of one's laptop into the internet archives, or like in Al-Jadida, which is like Layla already explained, one of the harvesting spots of red algae species, and also near to Al-Jadida, this city, there's also the industry to produce or extract the gelatin substitute, agar, and till now I can't get it out of my head when I'm buying products to check if there's agar, and often there is, but it's never specified if it's from Morocco or any other country. And being in Al-Jadida was nice because you could kind of settle the algae within a topography and a geography, and also grasp how the city of Al-Jadida is kind of very special. Even if you travel to Al-Jadida, it's not one of the richest cities of Morocco, not at all. And it was a very important harbor city back in the time of the French protectorate. It had a different name. It was Mazagan. And also we talked a lot with Layla about the changing names, like depending on the occupation force. The city of Al-Jadida, which means the new one, because there were Jewish settlers who were like settling a new time there. So it became Al-Jadida, but former times had very different names. So there were Portuguese people, the Spanish people, French people, local people, and Jewish settlers, actually. So all of this became part of this question: what would happen if the algae could tell its own story? And from this, we tried different methods of storytelling, recording electrical signals. And it was also really nice to exchange, like, when we had this group on social media, WhatsApp, and Sabrina shared her experiences in the lab, how she extracted like color codes. So it was fascinating to see how around this one, around the species, we could group, and how also Leila moved forward, seeing other species which were neglected and we didn't saw in former times. They had also their own story, their stories, and who also connected the two continents to each other. So the Romans, I mean, Leila can, I think, for sure talk more about the stories, but it was really fascinating.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really helpful to kind of have that overview into how you kind of came to be working together. I'm myself and Persephone, my colleague here at ONCA, we came to see your exhibition in London prior to the exhibition here, just because we really wanted to kind of get a better sense of your work. This was, yeah, you'd already been selected for this commission, but I was really kind of struck then by the kind of depth of the work and the research that you were doing. And then I learned that you had only formed the collective a few months prior, and my mind was kind of blown by this kind of prolificness and this like mass of work that you generated in such a short time. And then, you know, kind of thinking about how none of you, like Sabrina, you said you and Leila met in person at that exhibition for the first time. So yeah, could you talk a little bit about how you kind of managed that that process of working together? You've talked about it a little bit, but you know, what were the challenges of working remotely, and how did you kind of navigate that, and how did that kind of inform the work that got made in the end? Perhaps you could just expand on that a little bit.
Sorry. So because of the pandemic, I think I was trying to think of how we could work on a project together and it not be like the face-to-face is missing. So rather than like sort of adapting a regular residency format into something online, I tried to think of it more as just an online experience and how that would change the systems we put in place and the ways in which we work together. And I think that it's a testament to everyone's sort of willingness to share and to be honest and to be open with each other, because what was created were very like, you know, simple everyday tools like email, a WhatsApp group, like yeah, basically that, a Google Drive, because of everyone's like willingness to be honest and open and giving and authentic. We did connect very, very very quickly and very like organically. And I still to this day I haven't met Elodie, Leila or Sabrina in person, and this is now like the third project we're working on. So I think it's a testament to everyone's willingness, and also just using the digital tools like we mentioned, like people going on trips separately but sharing in the groups pictures, sharing the learnings with each other. So hopefully it felt a little bit like rather than there was a loss in us all being in a different place, that actually we all benefited from being everywhere because we all benefited from everyone's individual localities. I think that's how I tried to think of it.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. I found it very, like my world just suddenly expanded as a result of this residency, and I felt like my mind was kind of in these different places because I was getting taken to them by the different people on the project. And I think, yeah, there's like a remarkable amount of trust, considering that we just met, but I felt like yeah, having that trust really enabled us to all work together really well and get that insight into these different worlds and come together and make these works together.
I think also part of this residency is that like it's anyway, it's open-end, it moves forward. It's not just hybrid, and maybe it will be in future times more being meeting and each other, not just virtually. And also that Sarah joined through Jessica, and that she introduced some new topics to us together with Jessica. And this, like, the story of this collective is continuing and growing and maybe shrinking. We don't know, but I think this is also part of this experience.
Does anyone else that hasn't spoken, want to respond to any of that? It's fine if you don't, you can move on. I just want to give you the opportunity.
One thing I just wanted to say is that, I don't know, being from the diaspora, I think for a long time I felt a bit disconnected in a way, but I don't know, this feels very symbolic, this way of working, of being from the diaspora, and in some ways it actually feels really like comforting and natural to be in touch with these different places. Yeah, I found that a really good feeling. It's made me feel like weirdly connected, even though it might appear as though this is quite a disconnected way of working because you're not actually physically meeting anyone. I feel like we're very, very connected to the people that I'm working with and this way of working.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask you about the kind of use of archives within the process of making the work, but also how they've been displayed within the gallery space. You know, they've become quite a key part of the curation, and you know, it kind of offers a kind of snapshot of all, well, not all, some of the labour that kind of went into producing the video works that are also on display. So I wondered if you could talk about that kind of curatorial choice to do that in the ways that you have, and also just in relation to that, it's been interesting sort of noticing how visitors that are coming into the gallery, you know, some people will come in and they'll spend hours kind of looking at all the archival material, you know, watching all the videos, really kind of spending a lot of time with the work and engaging with the themes, because it is so kind of rich and multifaceted. And then there are other people that, without having conversation with, you know, a member of staff or you know, some of you that have been here in person, find it kind of hard to know like the way in to sort of begin to engage with some of these things. So yeah, I just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit more from your perspective.
I think we're working, like I can speak for 560 Zoom. It came quite naturally because we were strolling through the archives of the French Protectorate. They had the administration, French administration based in Morocco, had like their own photographers. And there, of course, El Jadida was featured, also the fishing industry, also lots about sardines, how Morocco's resources can be exploited and how Morocco can become an industrial nation. So pretty much this archive started for us to kind of imagine this place, but we were aware that it was a certain perspective. And then to see which kind of footage we would film, what are the things we would be interested in, how did the place change over time, and pretty much also research from other scholars about agriculture, how French introduced new agricultural methods which destroyed actually the ecology which was there before. And I think this, everybody used kind of different archives, which are, I think, personal, public ones, like also the French TV was part of one of our researches, textual. So I think it's a really vast facets of archives.
Yeah, and I think all of these different sources from all these different places fed into the works. So it's nice that people can experience that, but I think also people can just look at the work for what it is and not necessarily engaging with all that material. But I like the way it's presented as a kind of context, just like hanging around the gallery. Also, I'm really interested in like subverting those traditional archives, which a lot of the kind of hanging research is from, and reclaiming histories through kind of archiving myself. So much of my own personal history isn't known because it's contained in French archives that aren't accessible to Algerians. So, like, for example, I don't know what my Arabic surname was. That was forcibly changed by the French in the 1800s. And I don't even know if that is contained within these archives. There's this back and forth at the moment between Algeria and France, and has been for a long time, to kind of gain access to them. But anyway, I suppose like I'm really interested in reclaiming histories through archiving myself. And so I digitized that footage that is in the film that's on display in the gallery. But also kind of reimagining what archiving is. So it's not necessarily just articles and photos, it's also like stories. So even like imagining a person as an archive, which is why I really am very interested in like oral storytelling and getting my dad to read these stories aloud. So I wanted to weave that into the pieces that I had there, whilst also acknowledging all of this also fed into what we ended up creating.
Yeah, because the theme of the exhibition and a lot of sort of our research naturally goes to that, comes back to the word interdependence. And I think what was really important for us was kind of acknowledging how connected everything is, and that there are many different there's sort of many different ways into one issue. So for example, when if someone is coming into the space and is a bit like, wow, there's so much here, what is the way in, that in a way is sort of reflective of what it was like for us doing the research, because there is just so many ways in, and there's so many connections between things like colonialism, archiving, ecology, the loss of species. So these, especially the hanging research boards, which you can see behind Lydia, yes, like a weather girl, that they're a testament to that, and they're a way of connecting each of the works, connecting the space, and also the fact that they're see-through was like really important to us, because it for me anyway, kind of the thing that I come back to when working with archive and when working with sort of histories is that there is no one like truth, there's no one version of history. So the fact that they're see-through, it kind of is a testament to that malleability and that denial of the one set decided history, which is often decided by the most powerful. So that was my intention with those boards, I think.
It was when myself and Sabrina and Layla were here hanging the work. It was we were kind of having conversations about like the hanging panels specifically, and a lot of the consideration that went into the curation of the space, Jessica, that you mentioned earlier, was sort of thinking, you know, as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this navigation of the space, and sort of, you know, having to, you know, like looking through the panels and being able to see the kind of video works behind it, and sort of having to physically move yourself around it in order to be able to read and look at what was there, and kind of it was interesting kind of from a bodily perspective, like inhabiting the space in relation to these objects, but these kind of histories and stories and these materials that you know, I wasn't involved in kind of producing or accessing, and in these like geographical places and histories that are not my, you know, I don't have a personal connection with, but kind of I became very aware of myself in the space as I was kind of moving around it, and it made me think about myself in relation to these stories. And I think what you were saying about the kind of multiplicity of truth, and kind of wanting to just disrupt this idea of kind of one narrative or one history was really important. So just kind of responding to what's been said.
You did that very nicely. I like that.
So yeah, it would be interesting to hear from you about how you think that the work that you're making as a collective and or as individual artists differs to other artists or kind of collectives that are making work about extinction or endangered species, and why you think that's why or how you think that's kind of important and necessary, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think maybe I can add something here. Specifically thinking about like the work that is produced, it's not just archival, but it's kind of like the becoming of an archive. It's quite an active living thing. And I think, like, personally speaking about the work, a lot of it is kind of critiquing a lab, and it's more so kind of that, not so much, it's kind of critiquing the science in a way, which we know now, you know, well, not just know now, but over a period of time, also recently, we've expected that kind of information to be the kind of the final thing, but it's about that kind of process of going back and critiquing what's existing, what kind of specific processes are like, what are the conditions. I'm also talking personally about the work here. I think in terms of how that differs, I think with what we've made and what we've produced together, that kind of scientific positioning is slightly different. It's not so much taking the science for face value as fact, but kind of unpacking it, and putting the kind of the person at the center of that. So it's not so much just data or databases or or documents. It's kind of putting the personal and the kind of the human within that, which I think we did quite well. So I think I would add that to what you asked, Lydia. I don't know if anyone else wants to add something.
Yeah, specifically about the subject of the red algae, because I also kind of was researching how other artists and collectives were working with the algae, and they worked more with the algae as a material. For example, doing art works with bioplastic made of the algae, exhibited in a white cube format. And this is not a general critique, it's just observing how the algae is very multifaceted. I don't know even say, because in this kind of works, it's more kind of an object and a material you work with. You could also say exploit, but it really differs from artist to artist, to collective to collective. I mean, there are also collectives working with algae, how they could interact with humans. So, but I think how we centered the algae and broadened also at the same time the subject really showed how we could group around it, and at the same time not to stay fixed on it, and to connect to typical topics which add a value actually to our work. And I think it's pretty well shown behind you. I'm really amazed about the whole setup, which you did together with Sabrina and Leila, and how I think this multiple textures come pretty well. I think in presence even better than on the screen, actually.
I think also the fact that we are sort of predominantly from the diaspora and from North Africa makes it feel different, because we are, I feel like I'm really touching on losses that I already kind of really feel in my body. And those losses are also in the species, in the land, in memory. They're kind of inhabited in so many different ways, and I feel like that's a quite different positioning and starting point to come from when you have that personal connection. And I mean, even within my family and perhaps in like other people's, they are experiencing like the kind of impacts of climate change already more readily than, for example, where I am in England. So that feels like a different starting point.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask you about the publication that accompanies the exhibition, which we have here. So this is available to buy in printed copies or as a digital download on our website. So please do buy that. But it was a first for ONCA to have a kind of exhibition specific publication. And could you tell us a little bit more about the decision to do that, kind of what went into here versus what's kind of within the exhibition, and yeah, how the kind of two things are in dialogue with each other?
So I think first maybe to go back before we even thought of doing the publication was the fact that I had written this essay about the sardines being threatened to extinction, and that became the basis of mine and Sarah's work. So, and seeing how we collaborated, for example, I sent you the essay, and then you read it, you come back to me with your reflections, and we worked in that way. And I think it became apparent that we all, and then all separately also, we all have like written texts which were very important to the creation of the work and the context. And I can't remember when we actually decided to do the publication. Can anyone remember how that conversation went? Because now it just seems like the most natural thing in the world, but yeah, how did we come up with it?
I feel like we could probably, because we've done most of our talking online, we could probably find it somewhere as things are saved, right? But I think it was definitely a group, kind of like a group agreement that with all the research that we have and all the kind of the joining kind of, we already have our existing practices where these kind of areas are really important, maybe not so completely directly just working with algae, for example, or specific biological materials, but there's certain processes and yeah, there's certain processes, subject areas, all that were kind of pre-existing. And I think we kind of brought like a new element to the table, which was yeah, how we maybe more like a formal way of thinking about not just the residency, but relating that in kind of connection to the work that we produced. It's kind of, it was like maybe our opportunity to take a step back and think about what can add to this, what can add to the work. It's not so much like a itemizing of the exhibition. It's not that. It's not like you use the publication to go around the exhibition, but it's more so a kind of, yeah, it's in dialogue, definitely, as we all have been together. So I think there's like some kind of nuance within the publication, which is slightly different to that what's in the exhibition. Yeah, and I think it kind of becomes its own kind of archival piece now, right? Because it's part of the show and everything like that, but it's kind of what we put all together collectively. Yeah, so I think that's just kind of what I wanted to add, going off from what you were saying as well, Jessica.
I think it contains Jessica's essay, which is one of the pieces I was really excited to have in print. I'm kind of curious to hear more from you, if this is okay, Lydia, from Sarah, about the film and how did you just read that essay back to back, and like how did you engage with it and work with Jessica's, because we haven't heard much about this. I'm quite curious. So also we've got Sarah here.
Yeah, sure. So it really happened fast, because I came pretty later on, and we didn't have a lot of time to figure out what we can do. But it was just like very interesting. It was like a long piece, but I really, like I mentioned before, I really loved how, because first when I before I read it, I didn't expect it to be that, because we talked about it and it sounded more very like, serious and kind of scientific and everything. And I was quite afraid at the beginning, but I read it and it was just kind of like, like how Jessica is, how she's talking to us every day. And it was very simple. And the elements that she introduced about her cousin, I mean, to me, that was like a whole experience, because I was born and raised in Morocco, and I didn't have the same experience. So it was very interesting to hear about her experience living away from Morocco and kind of longing for that and having that connection with her cousin through sardines. So it was just kind of, I wish we had more time, because I feel like we could have done a lot more with it. But the first thing that we both thought might be easiest and fastest to really like give this essay justice would just to have this like abstract piece and just kind of go to a sardine factory and just kind of like, shoot really everything there, which was harder than we expected, because I didn't think it was going to be that hard to shoot in a sardine factory. But yeah, it was just kind of that. And then my most favorite part was to shoot all the street food and just kind of seeing people interact with sardines and all the different dishes. And I mean, that kind of stuff because you're Moroccan and you live with it every day. But when you kind of put into perspective just like those questions and like, like you're really like, will we eat sardines like we used to? Like that's a big question. It just kind of puts a lot into perspective. So that was really it. I don't know if Jessica wants to add anything to the process.
No, I think that covers it. I think it was nice also just to go back to like the question of how we work together and collaborate. It was nice for me to actually be with someone in real life because I'd still not met anyone that I'd worked with A.MAL yet. So it was nice to have that actual like in-person collaboration. And I think we did like, it was a really fast like turnaround, but I think you really I think you worked really well, and I really enjoyed like working together on it. And so that the essay, which the film that we put in the exhibition is based on, is an essay called Will We Eat Sardines Like We Used To, which is written in the format of a letter to my cousin, just to give context to anyone who's not bought the publication, but you should.
Thanks for asking that question. Layla. Yeah, I was thinking similarly. It'd be nice to yeah, heard a little bit more about that process. And Jessica, just to kind of like talk more about that. The letter with your cousin, it's an imagined kind of exchange, right? And in response to kind of language like barriers or limitations. And I was thinking about that in kind of in relation to what you were saying earlier, Layla, about sort of like reclaiming histories or kind of archives and kind of almost like I don't think this is the words that you use, but like rewriting yourself back into those kind of archives or histories. And yeah, like thinking about how you worked with your kind of family footage and kind of translated it from presumably analog footage into digital, and then kind of, yeah, I don't want to talk for you. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Me, Lydia?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's been really interesting, converting so much of the material objects into digital archives, and, you know, critiquing that process in itself. I have done, because there is something lost in that materiality, I think. And yeah, I really cling on to those material objects as well. So, for example, we have a lot of slides in my family. My English grandfather was a natural history photographer, and he also took a lot of photos of with my Algerian family when he visited. So I've been digitizing, and we have been digitizing so many of them, but I still am like really clinging on to the slides, even though they're deteriorating. So many of them have kind of got this fungal infection that is attacking them, and slides don't last forever anyway. They will deteriorate. But it's funny thinking about like what is lost in that process of just, you know, an image on a screen. That's what that becomes, and that kind of connection with the material object is lost. But yeah, I still feel a real, very, very much compelled to like record as much as I can all the time. And I feel kind of constantly terrified that objects are going to disappear, to the extent that my family have kind of put me in the role of the kind of guardian of all these objects. But it's kind of ridiculous, because, you know, for example, like I've been gifted this handmade blanket that my great aunt made, but it's, you know, it's on my wall in Bristol now, and in some ways I think that's completely absurd. But my family are like, you must have the blanket. So I have taken that role very seriously. But it is strange to think about the life of that blanket now just on a wall. It's not really in operation anymore. It's not being used. It makes me think sometimes of like an object in a museum, but it gives me great pleasure, and I see it every day. It's on my wall. But yeah, I think a lot as well about how to, like, how they could be like starting points. So I've written quite a few pieces about that blanket, how they can be kind of starting points for conversations, and yeah, things that can exist and materialize in the present, how they can be these kind of starting points to explore things in your history and within your family and within wider contexts, and just kind of keeps mushrooming out. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really lovely how you kind of described some of that. Yeah, I guess, I mean, we've sort of talked about it, but I guess I wanted to ask you, like your kind of process of working together obviously was very digital because it had to be, and just you said earlier about sort of not wanting to try and replicate a kind of in-person experience. You kind of wanted to work within those formats and kind of embrace what they offered. But I guess you know, the majority of the works that you've produced, they are digital. but some of the materials that you're working with are really material and very specific to real locations and that are very tied to, experiences that are very tied to those specific locations and sort of ways of life for people. So sort of thinking about extinction stories specifically, what do you think that digital artworks and kind of sharing some of those stories digitally with people, kind of what does that offer, and what are the limitations? And I guess I'm thinking about the consumption of images and kind of bombardment of images within social media, and you've kind of, I think, touched on that in how the show has been curated. You know, there's a lot of visual stimuli that people can kind of choose to engage with or not. So yeah, I just wanted to hear from you about that. Hope that makes sense.
I think that, like, remembering how we set up the space, like virtually, like in contrast to what you did then in presence, we talked a lot about how people could have the choice how to move through the exhibition and to choose also how they want to engage with the material, what they want to look at or listen to. So that's really nice. You said choice, or how they choose. And I think this is pretty much how we thought about to conceptualize or to think about this exhibition, and how to provide also the space to move and to think. This is pretty much how I experienced how to think about this exhibition. And then it was pretty interesting how it was set up. But I think it was this like process of coming together which made this exhibition how it is now. And it was pretty nice also to hear that how you explain or describe that people were looking up to the acetate sheets, because this is something it pops up, like things popping up on your screen on your phone, but the difference is you have the choice and you have to engage with it also bodily. So I mean, the acetate sheets are quite hanging also high, so it's more like it tries to be more like a physical experience and to embed our digital works within this physical space.
I think I also, when I first started the residency, thought about how, I couldn't speak on this because I'm not able to go to Al Jadida. I'm not able to see the people working with this algae. I'm not able to see this algae. But somehow, something that really shifted that for me is that is a story that I've told myself, I think, my whole life about myself. Like I don't have the right to tell a story because there's so much missing. And again, I think that is, that's really symptomatic of my experience being disconnected from Algeria, which is actually why I ended up feeling quite connected with this story and with this species. And, thinking about like what is contained in that disconnection and that loss. And how can you tell a story when you feel like there are things missing? So, like I worked so much with Elodie and Eunice, who were in Al Jadida. So like hearing these stories secondhand, which is actually pretty much my life history. It's, that's how it's just dribs and drabs from all over the place. And also how you can engage with that species even when you are disconnected to it, which I think feels really important in the context that we live in, because we are so disconnected from so many species. Like how can we find ways of connecting to it? Like even to the extent like I was listening to underwater soundscapes on my laptop. Like that was one of my modes of feeling like really connected to algae. And literally just being in landscapes, like being at the sea, that is where the algae comes from. And just like being in that landscape made me feel very connected and in a very bodily way, you know, just swimming in the sea and like touching and feeling the algae, even though it isn't the same algae. That combined with everything else made me feel connected and feel able to speak to that.
If I can add something to that as well, I think yeah, there's something about having real materials, and I think that's what was the purpose for visiting the labs as well. You know, Layla, as you were saying about the disconnection between the materiality and like the displacement of that. I think seeing the algae in their kind of bioreactors and how they're going through different filtration processes, their kind of the blooming aspect of them, that was really important in actually to kind of build and to kind of form a specific reference point with a specific kind of object like the bioreactor. So that was more so creating new kind of reference objects to kind of talk around. Yeah, so I think I just wanted to add that really quickly about kind of creating those kind of reference points and reference objects with the real materiality and kind of outsourcing it in a specific way. And also kind of talking to the people who maintain, manage and grow that algae. That was really important because it's kind of putting the person behind the practice and not just kind of seeing it as this is a machine blooming the algae. It's more so who is kind of managing and who's the kind of the technician behind that kind of process, which is very important anyway. I think that's one of those things that kind of pulled us together. The kind of the core like value and ethics of the algae and that side of it.
And I'll just add like one thing, like specifically digital works like video, like thinking specifically about audio visual work like sound and visual digital images. I think the like in terms of climate change and climate injustice, like sci-fi and eco horror and like speculative fiction is like sort of accepted now as like one of the, maybe not accepted, but it's thought of as like a way that we can get out of it, a way that we can imagine like an alternate reality or imagine our way out of sort of the catastrophe that we're in now. And I think it's with extinct species, you know, doing these abstract works like imagining what the algae would be thinking, or taking the electromagnetic frequency of the algae as if they're talking to each other, or you know, all of the different works, like that to me, that's an action of this of abstracting in a way to find a connection and to enable us to imagine an alternative reality where these species aren't extinct anymore, or where the species have lived on, or where a future where species are not going to go extinct at the same rate as they are doing now. So I think for me, imagination and speculative processes is something that's really key to like digital, to the digital works that are in the exhibition. And then just more broadly, like like films and fiction and novels, I think it's a really important like genre for the moment that we're in now.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Laura, but I just I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to speak if you feel comfortable to do so, or you know, to put a question into the chat, which I could read out if you prefer. But yeah, I'm conscious that we've got about 15 minutes left, and I just wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to ask something or say something in response if you wanted to, but absolutely no pressure. Okay, great. Yeah, so I guess is there any questions that you would like to ask of each other, or anything else you'd like to talk about whilst we're here?
Sarah, I'm kind of interested with your connection with sardines, if there's anything about that, like even just like memories that you have of sardines growing up, or anything you want to share about that.
Sure. So growing up, I hated sardines. Absolutely. I thought, you know how it is. It's kind of, I feel like every kid goes through that, because they're quite, although they taste good, they're quite uncomfortable to eat because of the bones. So I just really hated them. But growing up, I started to learn a little bit how to enjoy. I'm not sure when that started exactly. Probably after high school, but I just grew to love them. And I also understood how good they are for you as well, beneficially, like how healthy they are. But just the taste now, I can't. Maybe it has to do with the fact that I've been living in the US for 8 years, and there's no sardines here. They don't like sardines. They think it's quite like disgusting, most people. But they also haven't had fresh sardines. They've only had, the canned ones. So I feel like that's probably why. But yeah, being away from home that long and not having access to sardines just made me want them even more. So yeah, that's really my relationship to sardines. I love them now. I mean, I can eat them fried, sandwiches, baked, grilled. I mean, there's so many ways you can make a good sardine. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I'm also curious, how do they make them in your family?
Oh my gosh. The best way is to fry them. And then I'm not sure if you're familiar with batbout.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's like the Moroccan bread, very fluffy. You would have the batbout in it, the fried sardine, and then you would have this grilled tomato that you would put in the oven with some cilantro and some like hot sauce if you like something like harissa or something, and you would have that inside the sandwich as well. It's like the best way. Yep.
In my family, they make a sort of like a batter, a very spicy harissa batter, and then like shallow fry them. That's just the kind of staple. And they're, in the summertime, they're just on plates on the long plastic table. There's like plates of those.
Yeah, but I have to say also, like, just having them grilled fresh out of the water just with salt, that's also, I know Jessica's like she likes that.
Yeah, I ate a lot of that during the filming of the film. But yeah, it's like just this, it's such a staple. I think like it's like a humble sardine, but it's like everywhere, even like inland, like even in Marrakesh, there's like sardines being grilled on the streets as street food. Like they're just such a staple in like the cultural landscape of food. And that's like what's at risk. So that's what, I think that's what's in like what we wanted to draw on in this exhibition, was that with the like climate injustices, with the extinction of species, like what's lost is also these, if these traditions, these cultures, these foods, then the way of us really wanting sardines, because when we've not been in Morocco so long, like if sardines are gone, that's also gone, that way of connection, that way of yes, there's a lot there's a lot at stake.
That's funny you say that, because I've been thinking a lot about eels recently, and something that actually keeps them in existence is the people that fish for them. And it's funny how sometimes the people that can be connected, even if it's like as a food source, it's a connection. actually, so I think so often things that disappear is because there isn't a connection anymore. Like people don't, if you think about like in this country as well, that's definitely been the case with things that we just become more and more disconnected from. We don't have a relationship and we're not connected to them, so they just start disappearing because those histories and those connections are no longer in our memories anymore. It's like weird how quickly those memories and connections can disappear as well. Yeah.
I mean, it's nice how memory connects to food, or how food can thrive up memory. Like I remember every single spot where I eat good sardines. If I eat bad ones, maybe also I remember that one, but was not so often actually. And I like in the old city of Casablanca, you can eat them with marcuda, with fluffy potato things, also the batbot. And you can also eat eggs. I mean, you can add anything, but the sardine makes it better anyway. So, and I never eat sardines before when I moved from Germany to Morocco. So I started to love sardines and to also understand street food culture through sardines in Morocco. So it was a pretty nice experience.
Unless anyone else has any like other questions or kind of comments they want to add, I just wanted to ask you what's next for A.MAL, what you've got kind of coming up, and yeah, what's the year ahead got for you?
Well, next week we are re-showing the Red Gold exhibition, which was at P21, and we're showing it in the CCA in Glasgow. So that's from Wednesday the 19th of January till the Monday the 24th. And myself, Layla and Sabrina will be sort of doing a mini residency in the space as well. So we'll be trying to think about how to recontextualize the work within Glasgow, because that was where the COP26 was held, how to connect with each other and work together offline for the first time. So maybe we're not going to work as well and maybe it's all going to blow up in our faces. But so that's the most immediate next thing for A.MAL.
Any sort of aspirations for the year ahead for the collective that you might like to speak to, hopefully see happen?
I think to meet in presence in Morocco or somewhere else, but especially in Morocco. This would be really nice, and maybe it's going to happen. There's also already something planned, but it's not sure. But let's see, maybe we meet in Marrakesh this year.
I think also to do more collaborations with more artists who are Moroccan would be great, and to really think about like what the collective means and is going forward, because we're so kind of new. It's been quite organic, the growth and the working together. It's going to be interesting this year to just like watch that evolve and see what we become, you know, whether we are like a smaller collective and people come into that, we have these kind of this like web of people that weave in and out, maybe like Sarah becomes like part of the collective, you know, trying to explore that more this year. I'm quite excited to see how that evolves.
Okay, Laura's just signing off. Yeah, thank you so much for your time and kind of generosity in like sharing more about your work and your experiences and your process. It's yeah, it's been really lovely to hear, and it just kind of, the more that you talk about it, the more the kind of depth of your research and work just kind of comes to the fore. And yeah, so the exhibition's on at ONCA for another couple of weeks. It runs until the 28th of January. So definitely encourage people to come down and see it if you haven't already, and buy the publication, buy a printed copy, get a digital download, or both, and just, yeah, kind of spread the word. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now, but I won't end the meeting straight away. Stop recording.